So one of the we talked a little bit about my interest in morality and ethics, and I went into graduate school with an interest in studying the psychology behind morality. It just so happens that that wasn't being studied that much. It was as you know, just like anything else, there are fashions and trends in science, and moral development wasn't really that hot. So I thought I had to set it aside. I thought I was just going to have to pay my dues, study some traditional thing in psychology, and then if I was lucky enough to get a job as a professor, then I could start studying whatever I wanted. But fairly late in my graduate career, I realized that there were professors who were super supportive, and they would let me study whatever I wanted. One of those was Paul Bloom, and he actually taught a course on, I believe the whole thing was about disgust. It could have been just a couple of weeks that he spent on disgust, and that's what originally got me interested in the topic, because I was also interested in emotion, sort of as a side interest. And disgust is this interesting emotion that is strong. It's very easy to elicit in somebody, and some people more than others, and it seemed to play a fairly big role, or at least an oversized role, I thought, in the way that people talked about things that were right and wrong. Especially now, this is the late 90s now, but we had been through culture wars in the United States already about homosexuality and things, like anything that was perceived as deviant sexuality at that time. And the language of disgust was very strong. And I took an interest in this stuff from the angle of individual differences. So we all, for most emotions, we have just different kind of set levels, right? So some people are more anxious than others. Some people are happier than others. Some people are more easily disgusted than others. And building on the work of some other folks, we were interested in figuring out whether or not being more easily disgusted, being the sort of person who gets easily grossed out, would make you more likely to adopt certain views. That is, so imagine that I'm trying to convince you that homosexuality is wrong, and I say, like, think about how gross it is. Now, as a heterosexual man, I don't know if you are, but but just for the sake of the argument, you might think that sex that is not the kind of sex that you want is gross. So if you are especially prone to being easily grossed out, maybe those arguments work well on you. Maybe that's the way that I can get you to believe that some things are wrong, whether it's homosexuality, in some cases, maybe it's attitudes toward women's rights. We've seen a bunch of propaganda in wartime where people use disgust as a way to dehumanize outsiders. Maybe these individual differences could predict who is going to be more likely to believe those things, or to be persuaded by those kind of arguments. So that's where we started. Long story short, over the last 10 years, what we found was this thing that we didn't try to find. In fact, I ignored it for a while, and that was that disgust, the degree to which you are easily disgusted, predicts your political orientation, your basic right-left political orientation. And now we found this in multiple samples, multiple studies, our lab, other labs, and across the world. It seems to be that people who are more easily grossed out are more likely to say that they're politically conservative. And so a lot of the last 10 years of our research has been trying to unpack why that is. And I should say here, another way of saying this is that people who are liberal are less easily disgusted, because it's very easy to frame it in terms of, and I get a little bit annoyed, even though I'm liberal, I get annoyed at my field for trying to make the conservative part the thing that needs to be explained. Like there's no right amount of disgust to have. It just so happens that we found this pattern: less easily disgusted, more liberal; more easily disgusted, more conservative. And trying to explain why that is has taken up a lot of our time. Some of this work was originally done with Paul Bloom. We then ended up collaborating with Jonathan Haidt, and most of the work was done with my former grad student, Yoel Inbar. And there have just been a lot of very, very interesting and good collaborators we've had on this that have made it exciting.